Hello and welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to real lawyers about their lives in and out of the practice of law, how they got to be lawyers, and what their experience has been. I'm Louis Goodman, the host of the show, and yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody's perfect. In law school, he won a regional championship sponsored by the American Trial Lawyers Association. He has evaluated, handled, negotiated, and tried dozens of criminal cases. He is a member of the Charles Houston Bar Association and the Sacramento Consumer Attorneys. He has extensive experience in personal injury cases, representing injured individuals in motor vehicle accidents and other catastrophic incidents. He is truly a people's lawyer with excellent people skills. Dionne Choyce, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you, Dionne. I've always enjoyed talking to you. Where is your office? Thank you. Where's your office located now?
I have two offices. I have an office in Fairfield, California. I also have an office in Sacramento, California.
And what kind of a practice do you have?
So I do criminal, traffic, and personal injury. As you know, I started my career at the DA's office, and I got a tremendous amount of experience doing criminal cases. And from there, I opened my own practice where I was heavily involved in criminal cases. My practice has kind of evolved where I used to do like 80% criminal and 20% personal injury. It's kind of flip-flop now where I do probably 70% personal injury and maybe 30% criminal and traffic cases.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from the Bay Area. My family's from Berkeley, California. My mom and dad are both graduates of Berkeley High. That's where they kind of met and fell in love. And we grew up in Berkeley, but you know, my dad was in school at the time, so he went to school in Idaho, and I was actually born in Idaho. And he was, you know, once he finished school there, we came back to the Bay Area, back to Berkeley. And then we moved to Richmond area where, you know, I spent most of my school age days and graduated from Salesian High School.
What was your experience in Salesian like?
You know, Salesian actually helped me get stable and a good foot on track in terms of my educational goals. And I had a great experience. You know, my first year there, I got straight A's, and you know, I realized that you know I could do the work, and it was just a matter of the environment. And you know, I kind of thrived in that environment, and I did well.
Now, when you graduated from Salesian, where did you go to college?
I ended up going to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, which happens to be an all-male college as well, and all African-American male college primarily. My brother had went there. Well, my brother's 2 years ahead of me, and so he was there when I ended up starting. He was going into his junior year when I started as a freshman. So, you know, he kind of brought me in, acclimated me, and I sort of had a little head start there with him going there. But Morehouse College, you know, had some very famous alumni. Probably one of our famous is Martin Luther King Jr. And it was a tremendous experience for me coming from California, where, you know, we kind of have a melting pot. You know, it's pretty diverse here, but you know, in Atlanta was a little bit of shock for me coming from California because, you know, you still got remnants of the segregated South. You know, you still have a lot of the Deep South traditions, Confederate flags, that sort of thing. And so it definitely was a very eye-opening experience for me going to the South, being raised primarily in California.
What did you take up at Morehouse? What did you major in?
I majored in English. You know, when I first got to Morehouse, I read all of the, you know, pamphlets cover to cover in terms of the curriculum, the different majors, and, you know, what would be the best fit for me going forward, knowing that I wanted to become a lawyer. And English stood out because of, you know, all of the reading and writing necessary to, pursue an English degree, which I felt would prepare me for law school and the insane amount of reading and writing that you have to do there. So once I decided that English was going to be my major, I stuck with it, graduating in 4 years, and I was very focused.
Where did you go to law school?
Well, I took a detour before I went to law school. I ended up going to law school in California back at McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento.
So in between Morehouse and McGeorge, let's talk about what you did then.
Well, because when I started to get involved in my major, I started to volunteer at after-school programs, teaching kids, doing work at schools around Atlanta, Georgia. And I started to catch the eye of my dean in the English department. And, she felt that I would have great success in the field of education. And she knew my desire, to go to law school, but, she introduced me to a program up at Harvard. It was a 1-year master's program in education. And she kind of convinced me to take a year off and do that master's program at Harvard University. And I got my master's in education there. It was a great experience. And that whole area is just like the brain pulse of America. It's just so many intelligent people.
How long were you at Harvard?
It was a 1-year program.
What did you do after that?
I went back to California and I started law school at McGeorge.
So academically, you pretty much went straight through.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Straight through.
Wow.
Straight through.
When did you decide that you first wanted to be a lawyer? When did that kind of come across?
Well, I really got interested in becoming a lawyer watching Perry Mason when I was a kid. I admired him. I used to always enjoy how, he would always solve the case at the end of the trial, or do something spectacular where it was like, aha, got you. And, that kind of was that piqued my interest, because he was smooth, he was always well dressed, always articulate, always had command of the courtroom. And that really intrigued me. And so as a kid, I would always say, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be like Perry Mason. And then, as I, started to matriculate through high school and I ended up in college, the O.J. Simpson trial was going on, that whole O.J. Simpson ordeal. And I really got to see and listen to that trial. And I was just fascinated by all of the players. It was just, I just couldn't get enough of it. I woke up every day and listened to that trial over and over again. And that sort of cemented my goal of becoming a lawyer from when, I was intrigued by the Perry Mason sitcoms. And so that kind of sealed the deal, seeing Johnny Cochran, seeing him actually doing it live. And, I wanted to be like Johnny Cochran, to be honest. And so that kind of fueled the passion even further. I didn't know any lawyers growing up, to be honest.
And how was your experience at McGeorge? Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. And, I wouldn't change it at all.
What was your first legal job?
My first legal job, you mean out of law school or, during law school?
Well, what about during law school?
Well, my first job after my first year, I worked at an employment law firm. And, I had the opportunity to go overseas, and I always tell, students coming up, if you ever have the opportunity to go overseas, do that. Because I did this internship my first year at this employment law firm, one of the big employment law firms in Sacramento, and I hated it. And so I said after that experience that, that's not the Perry Mason type experience I want. I want to be in the courtroom. I want to get trial experience. And so I started to hone in on the Alameda County DA's office. And I heard great things about their office. And then from there, I decided to figure out a way to get in there. And so I ended up going to work for the California District Attorneys Association, which was located in Sacramento at the time. And they're the largest district attorneys association of all the DAs in California. And they, deal with policy and, writing grants and supporting district attorneys' offices across the country. So I said, if I can get in there, maybe I can figure out a way, to find my way to a DA's office, eventually Alameda County. So I did an internship with them after my first year. And I met a guy named Larry Brown, who was the executive director. I worked with him, and we got to become pretty close, and he liked my work. And so he was really good friends with Nancy O'Malley, and they were like, real close. So obviously he put in a good word for me, and I interviewed with Alameda County for their summer internship for the second year. And I was one of 10 internships. And you probably are aware of that internship program and know how competitive and difficult it is to get into that program. And, kind of once you're in there, you kind of have, unless you mess up, you pretty much got a job in Alameda County. So it ended up working out for me. And that was my first job out of law school.
So when you got out of law school, then the DA's office hired you as a deputy DA.
Correct. And so that summer, as an intern, I was able to do my first jury trial, supervised by Butch Ford. And, it was a DUI, and it was a DUI. I think it was either Capsack, who was the defense attorney. I think it was Capsack. And he had Capsack was a well-known DUI lawyer back then. And he would have a lot of attorneys that would come watch him during trials. And,
Yeah, he wrote a book.
Yeah, he would do all the training. And so, a lot of people looked up to him in terms of what he was doing in the DUI world. And so during this trial, it was funny. I had all these, defense attorneys in there watching it. So it was pretty cool.
How'd you do?
It was a guilty verdict. I did, I won the trial. But, to be honest, Louis, back then, I didn't have much, understanding what I was actually doing. I was kind of like, I had a good court presence. I was good at communicating to the jurors, but the legal pieces of the DUI and the scientific parts of it, I didn't know how complicated it was. I actually was very, very surprised at the work that was needed to actually prosecute DUI cases.
Yeah, DUI is complicated. There's a lot of science involved, and it's really complicated cases.
And as a defense attorney, it's even more complicated because you have to find a way to win. DUI cases, they're not sexy cases for defense attorneys. A lot of times jurors really don't like them. The law is usually against you, and you got great CHP officers who make damn good witnesses.
Yeah, and in DUI cases, as I'm sure Bruce Capsack would tell you, that the law is against you, the facts are against you, the judge is against you, the jury is not real excited about this, So it's being the Perry Mason in a DUI case is tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How long did you spend in the DA's office?
I spent about 3.5, 4 years there. So, being at the DA's office, it was a great experience. Lots of good attorneys, great judges. I mean, you really feel like you're somebody being a part of the DA's office,
Right. You're not stuck in some back room doing research in a cold environment.
Exactly. No, for me, it was great, a great experience. But I knew early on that I wasn't a career DA. I knew that in my heart that, I wasn't a true prosecutor.
So when you left the DA's office, what did you do?
Well, at the time that I was going through, these challenges, I had a buddy of mine that I went to law school at McGeorge who kept asking me to team up with him. He did DUIs, and he was kind of like the younger version of Capsack. He had these really bold ideas about specializing in DUIs and traffic out here in Sacramento. And, he had a whole marketing plan and all that, but he didn't have the experience.
Now, you've been a lawyer for quite a while. You've had prosecution experience, defense experience, civil experience, personal injury experience. What is it that you really like about practicing law?
The criminal experience, I've always been drawn to the excitement of being in court, being a trial lawyer. I really enjoy being a trial lawyer. And so, that to me has been the greatest part of being an attorney. And then the second part is owning my own business. And there's a lot of great attorneys out there, but there are a lot of poor businessmen or women who struggle running the business part of things.
Well, how has the business aspect of it gone for you?
Well, I think it's gone very well. I've had, obviously I've had challenges and ups and downs, but, I think in the early part of private practice, one of the biggest things for me was how to use my money and put it back in the business to grow the business. My dad was a developer and my grandfather was a contractor. And so I've been able to, also develop these commercial buildings. And I'm pretty proud of that because, it takes a lot of money to do, but at the same time, when it's all finished, it really is a great accomplishment to have something that you can call your own.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone were coming out of college and talking about going to law school, being a lawyer, would you recommend that?
If it's something that they truly, truly want to do, being a lawyer, it's not easy. People see the good parts of it, the nice cars, the money, the material things, but they don't see the long hours you put in, going to the jail at 8 o'clock and staying there till, 9 and 10, taking calls from clients at late night and, early mornings and, all of the grind work that you do. It's a hustle. And especially owning your own practice, it's not like you can rely on a steady paycheck. I mean, you really have to hustle for the money that you earn.
What, if anything, would you change about the way the legal system works?
Well, I definitely think, there needs to be criminal justice reform. And I think it's been happening slowly. We're still a long way away. But, like, for example, when we used to do all these drug cases back in the 90s and 2000s, all of that stuff has pretty much gone away now, It
really has, hasn't it?
It has.
Do you think the legal system is fair? Do you think the criminal justice system is fair?
Absolutely not. No. The rules are made up to target certain types of people, certain types of area. I think there's, targeted prosecutions, targeted law enforcement areas that, affect mainly Black and brown people of low economic status. I think there definitely needs to be reform. I think prosecutors sometimes feel that, it's all about getting convictions. And that's a problem. I think the attitude and these DA's offices, they have to change that sort of attitude about just trying to get convictions all the time and really do justice and work for the people. There's a lot of homeless challenges. There's people with mental abilities that make up the majority of the defendants in the criminal justice system. And you can't just put those people in a box and think that's going to solve the problem. they're still going to have these mental health challenges. They're still going to have economic challenges and homelessness. And they have to think of ways to deal with those things other than incarceration.
What other sorts of things do you like to do? Any sort of recreational pursuits, travel experience?
Oh, yeah, I love to travel.
Where you been? What do you like?
I just came back from Barbados recently. I was there for like 3 weeks. I've lived in Thailand for 6 months. My current wife and I, we went out there and took a sabbatical. I've been pretty much, throughout Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia. I really like Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Japan. And then I've also been to Central America. We traveled and lived in Nicaragua for 2 weeks on a farm with a family. It was part of a project my wife was doing. And we got to see how some of the rural farmers in Nicaragua live and experience that whole thing. It's a great experience. In fact, we're trying to go back there this year if we can. But yeah, traveling, it's one of those things where, if you're a trial lawyer, I think that traveling is a must because you have to be able to experience different cultures, to experience different types of people, the way they live, the way they eat. And that helps you when you're communicating with jurors, in my opinion. So somebody told me that trial lawyers have to travel. That's a must. And that's what I like to do.
Let's say you came into some real money. Somehow you fell into $3 or $4 billion. What, if anything, would you change in the way you live your life?
I thought about that recently because, I think the lottery is like almost $1 billion now. And I was thinking about going to get a ticket. And I was like, what would I do if I actually won?
What would you do if you actually won?
I think I would still do the same thing I'm doing. I mean, obviously, I think I could, not take as many cases that I have and maybe have more of a selective type of practice. But, I actually love what I do. I love helping people. I love, getting justice when I can. I think that being a lawyer is who I am. It's a part of me. I can't distinguish the two necessarily. And so I think I would continue doing what I'm doing, but I also would have the resources to give back more into the community. And so one of the things that I'm doing next door, I was able to purchase a property next door to my Sacramento office where I'm developing a property for the youth where they'll be able to come in and do events. They'll be able to have like a working space. And I want to bring in vocational training as well as coding training to help the youth with some of the changes in technology that are taking place, artificial intelligence and those type of things to get ahead in the world of technology.
Let's say you had a magic wand. It was like one thing in the world, the legal world or otherwise, and you could change one thing. What would that be? One
thing, if I could change, would probably be the criminal justice system. I think that, prisons, jails, all of that stuff just doesn't work.
Dionne Choyce, thanks so much for joining me today on Love Thy Lawyer. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you, and it's been fascinating hearing about your history.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. If you enjoyed listening, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the podcast. If you have comments or suggestions, send me an email. I promise I'll respond. Take a look at our website at lovethylawyer.com, where you can find all of our episodes, transcripts, photographs, and information. Thanks as always to my guests who share their wisdom, and to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman.
You're always fighting somebody, if it was a client or the judge or, somebody, you're always dealing with something,